This is what you may have missed on a previous episode of RetroActive.
It really hit all the marks to make a good game, and is probably one of the most remembered N64 games. I feel that if you own an N64 and not this game, you're not using your Nintendo correctly. Then after you're done with that, you better go buy Perfect Dark. But that's for an entirely different review.
And I stand by that. Owning an N64 and not Perfect Dark almost seems criminal to me. Goldeneye gets so much love for being one of the best games in the N64 library and also one of the most defining in the FPS genre, but Perfect Dark took everything that made Goldeneye great, brought it back, and added even more. Her name is Joanna Dark. It is the year 2023, and you'll be taking on missions passed on from the Carrington Institute. So unlike Goldeneye, this game has little more of a futuristic feel, and from the modern point of view, it really looks like a pretty standard FPS at first glance. But back then, as awesome as Goldeneye was, this spiritual successor was super awesome. The graphics got an upgrade with better animations for loading weapons, better dynamic lights, smoother textures, the ability to play at a higher resolution setting, and tons more, which was in big part due to the expansion pack for the Nintendo 64. In fact, the game was built so heavily around the expansion pack, you could only really play the multiplayer part of the game without it. The box stated only about 35% of the game was available without the pack. The sound was also better and offered Dolby Surround. There were other improvements as well, but yet oddly there's still no jumping ability, but ledges can be dropped from more often, and both you and the enemies had much better hand-to-hand combat. In fact, the enemies can now smack you with their guns or kick you if you get too close, which makes you dizzy and blurs the screen. They kept the same loved mechanic from Goldeneye, where shooting enemies in various spots on their bodies caused different amounts of damage, but one-hit kill headshots were now possible. Being able to quietly walk around and do headshots added a lot more strategy to this game. But other than that, this engine is essentially the same, which is not a bad thing. A few improvements, but they didn't try to fix what wasn't broken, which a lot of follow-ups seem to have issues with. If you enjoyed the gameplay mechanics in Goldeneye, you will be golden here. You're welcome for the pun. But one thing that really pushed Goldeneye was the multiplayer. A FPS that allowed for rich and enjoyable at-home multiplayer experience just didn't exist before Goldeneye. It was there in a small extent, but nothing really made 4 people want to sit on one couch in front of one TV. Thankfully, Rare didn't just reskin the multiplayer for Perfect Dark and call it a day. They made it even more awesome. Multiplayer in Perfect Dark is fun for several reasons, which I will obviously go over since that is the entire point of the review. But that is the key to the whole thing. It is simply just fun. It should easily be in the top 5 most enjoyable multiplayer experiences on Nintendo 64, and probably during that entire era of gaming. First off, it is really customizable, so it's hard to get bored of it during your night of gaming madness. You have several ways to play. You don't have to just run around killing each other in death matches. Not that it gets boring doing that. You also have gameplay modes much like Capture the Flag, which to fit the spy theme you have capturing a briefcase. There's also the little more original one where your team must keep hacking a computer for points, and there's a few others. There is also a nice selection of levels to choose from for each round. Some are straight from the single player campaign, and others are reminiscent but designed to offer a better multiplayer arena. Of course, there are the 2 classic levels from Goldeneye that have been redesigned. I'm not sure I brought up Goldeneye enough yet. Of course, you can also change the time limits, various gameplay mechanics, and what weapons appear on the map, all of which add just a little bit of extra flavor to keep things from getting stale. But the big thing that changed it all was the inclusion of bots. Well, or as I called here, simulants. You can have several different types of these bots, ranging from ones very minor AI to ones that are very hard to kill. There are even ones that behave in special ways, such as one that once killed, they immediately seek revenge after respawning. These bots really add many layers of fun into the multiplayer, keep it from being just 4 players and opening up different possibilities. When FPS multiplayer was dominated by online and LAN PC games, Goldeneye helped make the couch king again, and Perfect Dark made this even more awesome. Playing with 4 friends on your couch while having various and numerous actually intelligent AI made those nights of deathmatches and pizza just that much more sweet. With a vamped up engine compared to the smash hit that came before, and one hell of an at-home multiplayer experience, I'm not sure many people need another reason to get into this game, but what is a game without a sweet single-player experience? Well, not much really to me, but I know someone may disagree with that. But back then, a game didn't really have much success without a good single-player experience, and thankfully, Perfect Dark didn't skimp on this either. I really won't go too far into the story of the game, because that just really ruins half the fun. Uncovering the story in a single-player campaign is part of the whole experience, and Perfect Dark actually has a decent story. This is pretty uncommon for an FPS of this time, and definitely for one not based on any other franchise. As Joanna Dark working for the Carrington Institute, you'll be slowly uncovering various plots of another organization who is, well, doing evil things. The good thing about the single player mode is that once again, it doesn't just feel like most FPS games were at the time. There's not really a lot of corridors or dungeon, and there's not just a lot of enemies with no real goals other than finding exits. FPS games were starting to move away from this idea, but still a lot of them stuck with it. But Perfect Dark, like Goldeneye, had objectives which made you think. Of course, like the predecessor, the objectives list got longer and more difficult with what difficulty level you would choose. They could be as simple as finding a certain switch or placing a mine, to shutting down a bunch of computers in a set time limit. As I said, the levels aren't just corridors or dungeons. Your levels actually feel like actual buildings, streets, and more. Granted, this is still an FPS from the late 90s, so don't expect anything too breathtaking, unless you have your full nostalgia goggles on. But the levels get the job done of immersing you into the world you're playing in. Another plus side is that the story this time is told with cutscenes with voice acting. Even better, the voice acting isn't awful. I mean, I don't think I'd award anyone an Emmy, but I'm not laughing at every cutscene. The one character has some goofy lines and a performance you may shake your head to. The character that basically becomes your sidekick, Elvis, the stereotypical gray and large-headed alien, has some laughable lines. And not laughable how they were intended. Just check out this short clip.
What's wrong? I have a headache. And with a head this big, that's no joke.
Yeah. Wow. Don't worry, I didn't spoil too much there if you decided to not heed the big text warning. But still, even with some goofy moments, the story for what it is interesting, and the acting does make the game shine. The rest of the gameplay is pretty solid as well, and the upgrades to the system, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, did really help. There is a good variety of weapons, and even better is that each one has a secondary use. Some have a lock-on system, while others have grenades or sniper feature. You can also do hand-to-hand combat and steal weapons away from your enemies if you ever find yourself out of ammo. All these weapons and uses transfer over to the multiplayer as well. Perfect Dark was a great follow-up game that only helped push the FPS genre a little further. I'm kinda surprised it isn't talked about as much as Goldeneye, since it did everything it did but then added a little more. But it's always hard to top something that set such a high bar. Perfect Dark had a couple sequels and then a remake on Xbox Live, but the original is really the only way to go. I suggest you pick it up for your next retro party. I'll see you next time!